Hope to see you there.
This is what astronomers mean by a good location. Dry, 8,000 feet above sea level, miles away from bright city lights, it's considered to be one of the best observing sites in the world. Mount Hopkins near Tucson, Arizona, home to the Smithsonian Institution's Whipple Observatory. Sharing the mountain with the Eagle and the Hawk, the Whipple Observatory boasts several powerful telescopes, including the MMT, the Multiple Mirror Telescope. One of the largest, most sophisticated telescopes in the world, the Multiple Mirror is considered a forerunner in astronomical technology. And now Mount Hopkins is the headquarters to another marvel, smaller in scale, but potentially no less significant. Edelman and Dukes are here to see their new acquisition for the first time.
I didn't realize that Lou was working on the roof control, and right as I went by where the motor is for the roof, he turned the roof on and there was this roar. I thought it was that mountain lion. So I ran back to the building real fast. It was just the roof.
Their guide is Russ Genet. Genet is co-developer of the Automatic Photoelectric Telescope, or APT. Using a National Science Foundation grant, the College of Charleston and the Citadel recently acquired an automatic telescope from Genet, along with the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and Villanova University, a group that Genet has now dubbed the Four College Consortium. When not building robotic telescopes, Genet is an electrical engineer who designs flight simulators for the Air Force. His avocation as an amateur astronomer has now become almost a full-time job. This is the fruit of his labor, the APT service now housed in a converted satellite tracking station that Genet calls the Fairborn Observatory.
The crucial question is, just make it as efficient as it's possible to make it.
But then there's maybe some loss in efficiency, in flexibility.
Wow, that's looking good, Lou.
Sure is, yeah.
Yes.
Genet's partner at Fairborn is Lou Boyd. Like Genet, Boyd is an amateur astronomer and an electrical engineer employed by the telephone company. It was Boyd who built the first of these robotic eyes on the sky.
The other night, that if you can put a CCD camera on, why stand out in the cold?
Why stand This monster, this nice monster, put quotes in that, doesn't care. It just operates all the time. The same rate, the same behavior.
The right filter's always in.
No coffee breaks.
No coffee breaks, no midnight lunches. Poor thing, you feel sorry for it in a way.
Certainly if you had a special program that you were just going to make a few observations on, you wouldn't want to build an automatic telescope to do it. But for this kind of work where you have repetitive measurements that have to take place over and over for months and years, they make a lot of sense.
This new system holds incredible promise for astronomers like Edelman and Dukes. With robotic efficiency, their APT will be able to gather 2 to 3 times more data yearly than they could formerly expect, all from a prime site. At the same time, they'll be spared the drudgery of recording coordinates and data plots.
This is a different way, and in some senses a better way, but you have to be real careful you don't lose the wonder of the universe by doing everything with computers.
It would seem impossible. How could one lose a sense of wonder in a place like this when it's your job to contemplate the heavens? To an outsider, astronomy might seem the stuff of poets and philosophers, perched on a pristine mountaintop accompanied only by the moon, the stars, and the planets, trying to unlock their secrets. Romantic stuff indeed. But the wonder can easily slip away on a typical night at a manned observatory like this one. At sunset on a clear night, the telescope moves into action and the first observations commence. But the human operator controlling these instruments, either the astronomer or an observing assistant following a planned routine, spends his time not looking starry-eyed into the cosmos, but here, in a small room surrounded by computers. In the course of the evening, he moves the telescope, looking at star after star. His primary task is to record the detailed readings. Once the telescope is in position, he takes and marks down the data. He checks, rechecks, and records numbers that mean little until after considerable analysis. He then moves the telescope, and the process repeats over and over, dozens of times a night. It's an often tedious task that invites operator error in proportion to boredom and fatigue. An automatic telescope does what all robots do best, replaces the human operator whose time could be better spent on more creative activities. Automatic observations at the APT service work like this. The astronomer in his office hundreds of miles away from the telescope boots up his computer and enters a series of precise commands. Once completed, the program travels from his office over standard phone lines and is received by a computer at the telescope site. The astronomer's work is done for the day. Back at the telescope site, the computer receives its commands. As night approaches, it monitors the weather before deciding conditions are safe to observe. Then it opens up the observing platform. An hour after the sun dips below the horizon, the telescopes receive the signal to wake up and take commands. The computer may have received several programs from several astronomers, but it's able to assign priorities to various observations. These priorities may be affected by phase and location of the moon or anything else that might limit the visibility of certain stars. It begins an observation by first scanning the sky for its target star. The computer already knows the star's general location by programmed coordinates. But to bring it exactly to the center, the telescope actually looks for the star itself. Each observation involves at least 30 separate readings, references, and checks. The photometer at the telescope's base converts the starlight into electrical pulses, which the computer records and stores. Once the telescope gathers enough data, the computer immediately sends the APT looking for the next item on its priority list. It's an all-night, uninterrupted, highly efficient pattern no human observer could duplicate. In the morning, the computer simply calls the astronomer and sends him a good night's work. Sally Baliunas. Baliunas is an astronomer with the Smithsonian Institution. In her work for the Smithsonian, she currently uses an APT.
In this case, we not only wanted to develop something at the cutting edge and push it beyond the edge, but we also are driven by the science. We could only do some of our scientific projects by using the APT technology. I've got a project that's been running for 23 years at Mount Wilson, and I don't think I could have stood there every night and done it for 23 years. So I think you would limit your options if you had to do the observing yourself. You would say, I know I'm good for 2 weeks, but I'm not good for a month. So you'd think of a 2-week-long project. So your science is more limited. This way you have more creativity.
For me, it's very impressive because all things is made automatically. That's mean we can sleep during the night and it works. That means also we have to prepare the observation very nicely, and we receive on the morning our data on our desk. That's been on your lab, and we spend our time to think to the problems, to the astrophysical problems, and not to observe and put your eyes in the telescope.
This is a daytime demonstration of a group of working APTs at the Fairborn Observatory. As they go through their routines, they click, beep, and chirp their individual tunes as they sweep the sky in a precise computer-controlled dance. These are the original APTs built by Boyd and Genet. A triumph of basement tinkering and backyard engineering, they represent the brief evolution of Boyd and Genet's work. These early systems, now housed at a major research observatory, grew from ideas to reality in the hands of non-professionals. Small telescopes like these, designed with off-the-shelf technology, have traditionally been an inexpensive lure to amateur astronomers like Boyd and Genet. Russ Genet's interest in APTs began over 10 years ago. He became fascinated with what he calls doing real science. After poring through hundreds of scientific journals, he found the perfect kind of backyard astronomy.
And in 5 years of the journal, there were 30 papers based on observations that I could have made in the backyard if I had the right equipment. But the key thing was that 28 of the 30 all used the same technique, this photoelectric photometry, which is measuring the brightness or color of a star. And particularly these were, of the 28 papers in photometry, the bulk of them were on variable stars. And these are stars that, well, some of them pulsate. And as they change their diameter, they change their brightness. And then there's stars where one star moves around in front of the other, and so it's eclipsing it. And as that happens, the brightness will decrease, sometimes quite rapidly. For instance, there are stars that rotate around in just 6 hours. So every 6 hours you're getting an eclipse. And then there's stars that have these big groups of spots. Now, if the spots were even, you wouldn't be able to see any change, but the spots tend to get on one hemisphere. So as this rotates around your line of sight, the spots are darker than the rest of the star, and the light will drop. And so I says, aha, if they could do it, I could do it. And so I decided, well, what I'll do is I'll put together an observatory. And since we lived outside the little town of Fairborn, Ohio, we decided, well, we'll call it the Fairborn Observatory. Not being presumptuous or anything.
Professor Douglas Hall of Vanderbilt University.
You can also find detractors who will make sweeping statements such as, there can be no useful science from amateur astronomers. Well, that's just a false statement, apart from being a little arrogant and presumptive. No, I've had very good success with amateurs, have a great faith in them. The average amateur, I would say, really has a little bit of an inferiority complex, feels a little timid, perhaps because they have heard of these people that don't have any, categorically don't have any faith in their work.
Hall and Genet met over a decade ago, and they subsequently co-founded the IAPPP in hopes of improving the efforts of amateur photometrists. But they soon realized that what they were creating was a cross-pollination of disciplines, as Genet, with his engineering background, kept finding ways of improving observing techniques through the use of computers and automation.
We have, in the process of these years, 4 years or so, discovered literally dozens of new variable stars, stars that vary in brightness. And the stars we're talking about are all quite bright stars. I'd say, verging on half of them are among the few stars that are bright enough to be seen with the naked eye. We call it the naked eye stars. They are variable stars. And that had never been known before, I think simply because no one had bothered to look at these stars before, and we did and found them to be variable.
Working together, Hall, Boyd, and Genet have published rotational periods for over 80 stars, itself an astronomical feat.
In 1985, the American Astronomical Society held their annual meeting in Tucson. And I decided to go to this meeting, and Lou and myself and Doug Hall from Vanderbilt all went. And at the meeting, it was very cold that year in Ohio. It was -20, and it was 70 degrees in Tucson. So I called home, well, 70 degrees here, how's the weather there? You know, it's -20. And so the decision was made, let's move from Ohio out to Arizona and pursue these automatic telescopes in a serious manner.
The old dome of Mission San Javier near Tucson. For centuries, this beautiful Spanish mission has been a local landmark. In this century, it's right at home among the many domes in the surrounding area. Dozens of universities and research institutions have erected all kinds of telescopes to take advantage of the clear skies and abundant expertise found here. The mountains around Tucson are now home to more telescopes than any other area in the world. Kitt Peak National Observatory. This is one of the high holy places of astronomy. Professional astronomers come here for observing runs on one of several enormous and sophisticated telescopes. Many of the orthodox professionals were skeptical of amateurs like those who conceived the small, whirring, clicking APTs. After all, what could an amateur with a tiny telescope do that couldn't be done infinitely better on a behemoth like the 4-meter? But they're now realizing that APTs and other small new generation telescopes actually complement the large telescopes and perform totally different jobs. Astronomer Dave Crawford supervised the construction of the 4-meter.
Exactly, and in fact, a large telescope like the 4-meter there in the background would be so much overkill you would never use it on these kind of programs. It works on problems for which it is unique. And the small telescopes like these others on the mountain or many of these automatic telescopes we talk about are nearly ideal for these programs. In addition, the small ones are much less expensive to build, and so you can get enough time on them to do some of these kinds of problems, working on variable stars or long-term programs that you just can't get on a large one. So it's the only way to do many problems in astronomy is with these small ones. And those problems are also ones where the automatic feature of these telescopes is so good.
APTs, the backyard hobby, are looking at a future well beyond the garden wall. This telescope represents a new phase in the APT's development. Using the expertise gained from developing the previous APTs, Russ Genet plans to develop software and telescope plans that he hopes will be affordable to almost any stargazer.
The thing that's unique about this telescope as compared to the earlier ones is what we're trying to do here is put together a telescope that can actually be produced, a number of them, from plans by normal machine shops using software that is readily available. So people that want to take advantage of this technology will have a source to purchase telescopes from.
Here, programmer Don Epand is using the Automatic Telescope Instruction Set, or ATIS file, to tell the telescope what to do.
Once you have telescopes like this on a remote mountain in Arizona and you're calling up from some place in Connecticut or Massachusetts over the regular phone lines, it's not a huge leap of the imagination to say, well, let's put these on the space station. You could have an uplink and downlink, or maybe even on the moon, where you wouldn't have the atmosphere to affect your results. And these are low enough in cost that instead of just having, a few telescopes, you could have a whole farm of telescopes on the space station, and maybe in some crater in the moon to protect it from Earthshine. There's this sprinkling of telescopes, and you could have then hundreds or even thousands of professors and their students that could do research in space. We hope NASA likes the idea of lots of people doing science instead of just a few.
The thing you have to understand is that the kind of data these telescopes are taking right now, differential photometry, is a kind of measurement that while it produces results that are scientifically useful, it's still conceptually easy for students to understand what kind of measurements are being made and how to reduce those measurements. So it's a kind of science that's frontier, very useful, and yet even undergraduate students, even high school students can understand how to use it.